We live in a fast-changing world of evolving values, relative morals, situational ethics, and alternative lifestyles. In such a world of rapid change, many people are seeking solid foundations. For them, the future is uncertain. So some form of guidance through the maze of life is essential. Our first episode traced the human race's earliest search for immortality. The ancient Egyptians failed to discover the secrets to eternal youth, peace and happiness. Other ancient cultures adopted their own philosophies about life and the hereafter, some of which continue to flourish. One such collection, in the form of ancient manuscripts and commonly known as the Bible, claims to have the answer to humanity's quest for eternal life. It suggests that an endless life is there for the asking and that it's free. But is anything in today's world really free? Are the Bible's ancient claims anything more than just wishful thinking? And how can we know? In 1947, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls astounded the world. When the world's scholars realised that the scrolls were genuine, they started asking questions. How old were they? Why were they in the caves? And who wrote them? Some of the answers came in the excavations of the ruins at Qumran. Between the cliffs and the Dead Sea, there had lived a religious community known as the Essenes.
Who were these people called the Essenes? Like other groups such as the Pharisees and Sadducees, they were a sect of Judaism in the 1st century AD.
About 150 BC, a priest who had been working in the temple took a group of other priests to the wilderness, and they found an old fort, probably from the time of Isaiah, and they lived there in the wilderness. They developed a community that existed from about 150 to around 68, the spring of 68, when it was burned. They developed a community that many of us refer to as monastic. They have withdrawn from society. They do not seem to be married. They seem to be celibate. So they are a very important group. This is the great writing of this period, the time of Jesus. These are the writers, the thinkers, and they have left us their library.
One of the things which is clear in excavating a site like Qumran is that we see the communal character of the site here. There's nothing which is residential which would suggest that they were living here. They lived in caves around the site. They came to the site during the day to bathe, to eat, to work, and to study.
The singularly most important detail about the Qumran community is the provisions for water. Here the water comes in, it goes through an infiltration tank to cleanse it, it pours into the community, and you have nothing but cisterns throughout the community.
They placed great emphasis on ritual purity, practicing immersion in water as a symbol of the washing away of sins. John the Baptist baptised people not far from here, and some have suggested that he may well have been an Essene.
John the Baptizer had been, for a period of time, a member of the Qumran community. In any case, it looks like he may have been there and left. Now, what two things convince me of that? One, what do we know about his eating habits? He eats locusts and wild honey. That means that he may have made a vow at Qumran he would never accept food from anyone. He's eating what's in the desert. And both these are permissible according to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Secondly, what does he wear? Does he wear the nice garments that the priest could give him or someone visiting him? They're coming by the throngs to be baptized. Certainly they would give him a garment. What does he wear? Animal skins. Again, he would promise at Qumran not to ever wear anything that someone else had made.
The link between the Essenes and the scrolls was the discovery of the scriptorium, or the writing room. In this room were broken pieces of pottery identical to the ones in the caves. Around the room were plaster benches used as writing tables where the scrolls were checked and quite possibly copied by hand. Near the desk, Inkwells were discovered containing dried up ink nearly 2,000 years old.
Now we have found a library, and the contents of it are being studied. Secondly, it is a library from the time of Jesus. Now it becomes very clear why this is so important. We're getting letters, we're getting writing material, we're getting sheets on which a scribe is preparing for the day's work. We have hymn books, we have rule books, we have a description of what the end of time will be like. This is exceedingly important for helping us understand the time in which Jesus lived, the dreams of those people.
The Essenes believed in a coming teacher of righteousness and a final battle between good and evil. They expected the Messiah and the end of the world. But for the Essenes, the end came with the Jewish war in 66 AD.
In 66, the little nation Israel revolted against the might of Rome, and the war continued. And finally, in 68, Vespasian, who was going to become emperor of Rome, leads his troop into Jericho and its environs, which means including Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were composed, and the caves where they were found. And in the spring of 68, they burned it.
To protect their scrolls, the Essenes carefully wrapped them in linen, placed them in clay jars, and hid them in the nearby caves.
This is the cave where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. For nearly 2,000 years, these jars remained untouched by human hands.
Well, it was here in 1947 that a young Bedouin found what many people regard as one of the most important archaeological finds of the 20th century.
A Tamil Bedouin, Muhammad Adib, lost a sheep or a goat and went looking for it. And in the process, he found a cave. Well, they know that there's treasure in these caves, gold and silver. Wow, what we could find. We can become rich.
He threw a stone in this crevice here. One story says that he was looking for a lost sheep or a goat. Whatever happened, he went into the cave because something had broken inside when the stone bounced around.
And what does he find? Gold? No. Silver? No. Coins? No. They're finding coins all the time. No coins. Smelly leather. Ugh.
And then he found a series of ceramic jars, not knowing what they were, but he realized that there were important documents in there. He came back the following day with a friend because you realize that the access here is very difficult. And they crawled in there and they brought out documents which eventually became cave number 1 of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
It looks like their story has some credence to it because they all kind of said the same thing. I was talking with one of them that was there. He says, I'm Muhammad Adib. I found the scrolls. Well, he may not be Muhammad Adib because we have evidence that Muhammad Adib died 2 years ago. Well, now you see, if we can't even know who Muhammad Adib is, how can we reconstruct what happened in 47? But the story seems to be the same.
When he went into the cave, according to his account, he found a series of jars. There were around 10 jars, and I think only 4 of them really contained documents. What happened to the other documents, we don't know, but it was clear that in the last 2,000 years, someone else had been in there. The story is really an incredible story, because what happened here are these 2 Bedouin who now are trying to find somebody to buy this stuff. They have no idea what it is. They took it to Bethlehem, went around from merchant to merchant. Nobody wanted to buy it. Stories have it that he even tried to sell it to a sandal maker, saying it's very thin, but if you double it over and you glue it, perhaps you can make sandal straps out of it.
When the Bedouin arrived here in Bethlehem, they sold the scrolls to a merchant. His name, Kando. Thinking the writing was Syrian, the merchant sold them to the monastery of St. Mark in Jerusalem. The scrolls were eventually smuggled to the United States. Eventually, some of the scrolls were shown to scholars who doubted their authenticity. However, when finally convinced of their immense value, the hunt was on. Bedouin tribesmen foraged the hills and made a good living out of selling tiny fragments, auctioning off their finds to the highest bidder. The price of postage stamp-sized pieces skyrocketed.
In 1952, Yigal Yadin, who was the professor of archaeology later on at the Hebrew University, was on a speaking tour in New York. And in the newspaper, they saw an ad there which said ancient documents for sale. It was in the Wall Street Journal of all places. They called up the phone number, and what was it? It was these original documents which they tried to buy in 1947, 1948. They then negotiated a price, and those documents then became into the hands of the Israeli government, and they're what you see today at the Israel Museum.
This is cave number 4, often called the Cave of the Wounded Partridge. Not long after some of the initial discoveries of the scrolls, some Bedouin were discussing where to look for more scrolls. One man recalled that several months earlier, while he was hunting, he'd shot and wounded a partridge. Following the bird, he saw it disappear into a cave. When the Bedouin hastily made their way back to the cave, they discovered some 40,000 fragments of the scrolls.
The years since this exciting discovery have seen the massive task of piecing together the huge jigsaw puzzle of fragments, reading the ancient Hebrew, translating the work, and finally publishing the text.
How do we put the pieces together? Very slowly, very carefully, and in dialogue with our colleagues. Have I put it together right? I don't want to be wrong, not so much for ego. Oh, let's not worry about that, because these are established scholars that are working. But we don't want to lead people with bad information. Remember, one little piece is what makes a jigsaw puzzle come to light. We know what it is. What if we have created something that never existed? That's an awesome professional responsibility. A lot of people have heard about the Dead Sea Scrolls because of the controversy. What is the controversy? That in 47, the scrolls were found, they were given to Christians, and the Christians haven't published them. Now, it doesn't take a lot of intelligence to figure that from that point of view, the Christians must have seen something that they didn't want other people to see and were afraid of their faith or afraid of what people might hear, so Christianity becomes defensive. So that's your controversy. What is the truth? The scrolls were found between 47 up until 56. Second, all of the large Dead Sea Scrolls, that is a scroll, something more than 2 feet, was published by Christians. That's why we know about scrolls. That's why we have hundreds and hundreds of pages of translations. 3, what about the truth that not everything has been published? That is true. Even today as we speak here in September of 97, not everything has been published. Why?